congratulations to everybody who's worked so hard on bringing this project to fruition and having the foresight and the perseverance to make it happen.
For decades, the Crown's most carefully guarded secrets were never whispered. They were buried under tradition, sealed inside centuries-old laws, and protected by a man who believed he could control destiny itself, King Charles III. But what if everything he fought to secure was never truly his to control? What if the system he trusted was quietly preparing to hand it all to someone else? Someone no one was watching, Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, because behind palace walls, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but dangerously quietly. The moment it surfaced, it didn't explode, it unraveled. A legal confirmation, calm, clinical, almost too ordinary. But the implications, they hit like a silent earthquake. Lawyers tied to Edward didn't accuse, they didn't challenge. They simply revealed how the system works, and suddenly the entire royal structure felt like it was balancing on a knife's edge. Think about that. For years, Charles didn't just prepare to be king, he engineered the future. Every estate, every tradition, every financial structure that keeps the monarchy alive wasn't left to chance. It was studied, controlled, protected. He spent decades shaping something bigger than himself, a machine designed to sustain royal power long after him. But here's where it gets unsettling. That machine doesn't run on personal intention, it runs on law. And the law, it doesn't care who worked hardest. It doesn't care who planned the longest. It doesn't even care who deserves it. It only follows rules written centuries ago. Rules that don't bend for anyone, not even a king. And suddenly, those rules are pointing somewhere unexpected. Edward, yes, the quiet one, the overlooked one, the brother who never seemed part of the grand power game, the man who stayed in the background while Charles stood at the center of royal evolution. The same Edward who spent years being described as steady, calm, unproblematic, but now that silence feels different. Because silence can hide things, and sometimes the person making the least noise is the one moving the closest to power. The legal clarification didn't come wrapped in drama. No accusations, no battles, just a simple explanation. Under certain long-standing frameworks tied to titles and inheritance, Edward could find himself connected to assets, influence, and responsibilities that Charles spent a lifetime protecting. Let that sink in, not because anyone decided it, but because the system says so. And that's where the real tension begins, because these aren't just properties, these are the backbone of the monarchy. Estates that fund royal life, lands that carry centuries of authority, structures that determine who holds influence behind the scenes. We're talking about foundations like the Duchy of Cornwall, a financial powerhouse tied directly to the heir. A system Charles didn't just manage, he transformed. He modernized it, strengthened it, built it into something stable, profitable, and future-proof. Or at least, he thought he did. Because here's the twist no one saw coming. The moment Charles became king, that entire empire, the Duchy of Cornwall, didn't stay with him. It moved automatically to Prince William. No negotiation, no hesitation, just tradition executing itself like a silent command. And that's the pattern. Everything in this world moves according to rules written long before any of them were born. Rules that don't explain themselves, rules that don't ask permission, rules that decide. And now those same rules are shining a light on Edward, which raises a question no one in the palace can ignore. Was this always going to happen? Because if it was, then everything Charles fought to protect was never fully his to control. It was simply his turn to hold it, and someone else's turn might be coming. What makes this even more unsettling is Edward's past. He wasn't shaped like the others. While Charles was preparing for kingship, Edward was exploring something completely different. Media, television, production, a royal stepping into the entertainment world, something almost unheard of. It raised eyebrows, it sparked criticism, it made him look detached from the core of royal power. But what if that distance was misleading? Because stepping away doesn't mean stepping out. Eventually, Edward returned, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. He took on duties, built a reputation, supported charities, represented the crown without demanding attention. And that's the part people overlooked. He wasn't chasing power, he was building trust. And in a system governed by tradition and reliability, trust is currency. Over time, he became something rare inside the monarchy: predictable, stable, consistent. While headlines swirled around others, Edward remained untouched. And now, that quiet consistency suddenly looks like preparation. Not intentional, not strategic, but perfectly aligned with a system that rewards continuity over chaos. Because the monarchy isn't just about visibility, it's about structure. And structures don't elevate the loudest voice, they elevate the most fitting piece. The deeper you look, the more complicated it becomes. Royal assets aren't owned the way normal wealth is owned. They exist exist inside a web of legal definitions, historical agreements, and constitutional boundaries. Some belong to the monarch, some belong to the institution, some are held in trust for future generations. It's not ownership, it's stewardship. And stewardship passes according to rules, not emotions, not effort, not even intention. Which is why this revelation is so unsettling, because it suggests that while Charles was shaping the monarchy's future, the monarchy itself was quietly shaping something else. An outcome no one publicly predicted. An outcome where Edward, the quiet, overlooked brother, becomes far more significant than anyone expected. And inside the palace, no one is panicking publicly. That's not how this world works. Everything remains calm, measured, controlled. But beneath that calm, questions are building. Because when a system this old starts revealing hidden pathways, it forces everyone to ask the same uncomfortable question. What else is already decided that we just haven't noticed yet? And here's where everything starts to feel almost predetermined. Because once you step deeper into the machinery of the monarchy, you realize something chilling. This was never about sudden change. This was about a system slowly revealing what was already written into its bones. The moment legal experts calmly clarified Edward's position, it didn't just spark curiosity, it exposed a pattern that had been quietly unfolding while the world was distracted by headlines, scandals, and shifting royal narratives. Because while everyone was watching the spotlight figures, the system was quietly aligning itself around stability. And stability has a name: Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh. But let's not rush this, because this isn't about a sudden rise, it's about something far more unsettling. A slow, almost invisible repositioning that only becomes obvious after it's already happened. For years, King Charles III carried the weight of expectation like no one else in modern royal history. Decades of preparation, decades of control, decades of shaping the monarchy into something leaner, more efficient, more modern. He wasn't just waiting to be king, he was designing what kingship would look like when his time came. He pushed for a streamlined royal family, fewer senior members, clearer roles, less chaos, more control. But here's the contradiction no one talks about. You can streamline people, but you cannot streamline history. Because history doesn't shrink, it doesn't simplify, it doesn't adapt to modern expectations the way people hope it will. It continues forward, carrying every law, every precedent, every hidden clause that was written centuries ago. And those clauses, they don't disappear just because the monarchy wants to look modern. They wait. And then, at the exact moment no one expects, they activate. That's what this legal clarification feels like. Not a disruption, a trigger. Because suddenly, royal observers started asking questions they hadn't asked before. Questions about how influence is really distributed inside the monarchy. Questions about which roles actually hold power, not publicly, but structurally. And the answers? They point somewhere uncomfortable. Because power inside the monarchy doesn't always sit with the most visible figure. It sits with the one positioned correctly within the system. And Edward is positioned perfectly. Think about it. No controversy, no instability, no public fractures, just decades of consistent, reliable service. The kind of profile that doesn't create headlines but earns trust within an institution that values continuity above everything else. And then there's 2023. The moment Charles made a move that seemed ceremonial on the surface, but now feels loaded with deeper meaning. He granted Edward the title Duke of Edinburgh, a title once held by Prince Philip, a figure synonymous with discipline, structure, and unwavering commitment to the monarchy's internal strength. At the time, it looked like recognition, a tribute, a gesture of respect. But now, it feels like placement, because titles in the royal world are never just titles. They are keys to influence, keys to responsibility, keys to pathways that most people don't even realize exist. And once Edward stepped into that role, something shifted, not publicly, but structurally, because that title carries weight far beyond ceremony. It connects to legacy, to programs like the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, a global initiative shaping millions of young lives. It ties Edward directly into one of the monarchy's most respected and far-reaching frameworks. And suddenly, the quiet royal isn't just supporting the system anymore. He's embedded within its core, which raises another unsettling question. Was this always part of the design? Because if you trace the lines carefully, you start to see how everything connects. The estates, The titles, the responsibilities, the legal frameworks, they don't operate independently. They form a network, a system that quietly ensures continuity no matter what happens on the surface. And that system doesn't rely on one person. It redistributes, it adapts, it moves power where it needs to go. And right now, some of that movement is pointing toward Edward. Inside the royal household, nothing appears chaotic. No dramatic confrontations, no public disagreements, just careful observation, quiet analysis, measured responses. Because this is how the monarchy survives. It doesn't react emotionally, it adjusts strategically. But don't mistake silence for simplicity, because behind closed doors, this changes the conversation. Not about who sits on the throne, that remains clear, but about who holds influence within the structure that supports the throne. And influence, that's where things get complicated, because influence doesn't always belong to the king alone. It's shared across roles, across responsibilities, across individuals who operate within the framework that keeps the monarchy functioning. And Edward's role in that framework is no longer being overlooked. It's being studied, analyzed, reconsidered. At the same time, Prince William stands firmly in his position as heir, controlling the Duchy of Cornwall, the financial engine that once defined Charles's power. That transition followed tradition perfectly, predictably, cleanly. But the rest of the system, not so simple. Because outside of that direct line, there are layers, hidden layers, legal layers, historical layers that don't always align with public perception. And those layers are where Edward's significance grows, slowly, quietly, but undeniably. Meanwhile, Charles continues to push his vision forward, a modern monarchy, efficient and focused. But even that vision must operate within the boundaries of the system he inherited. And here's the paradox. The more he tries to modernize the monarchy, the more the ancient framework asserts itself, reminding everyone that this institution doesn't belong to one generation. It belongs to history itself. And history doesn't always follow expectations. Which brings us back to the question that now lingers over everything, not loudly, but persistently. Was this outcome already written long before any of them stepped into their roles? Because if it was, then what we're witnessing isn't change, it's revelation. A slow unveiling of a structure that has always been there, quietly determining who stands where when the time comes. And Edward, he may not have fought for it, he may not have planned for it, but step by step, title by title, responsibility by responsibility, he is moving into a position no one truly predicted, not as a rival, not as a disruptor, but as something far more powerful in the world of monarchy. A stabilizer, a hidden pillar, a figure who doesn't dominate the spotlight, but quietly holds up the structure behind it. And if history has taught us anything, it's this. The most important figures in a system like this are not always the ones you see. They're the ones the system chooses. And right now, the system seems to be choosing Edward.